Hello and welcome to this special briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. I am Jonathan Beck, Director of Content. Our guest today is Yossi Kuperwasser, former head of military intelligence research, and then he was top advisor, senior the manager actually of the Government Ministry for Strategic Affairs, and today he heads the Jerusalem Institute for Strategic Studies, the JISS. Hello, Mr. Kuperwasser, and thank you for joining us today.
Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, but doesn't matter.
So thank you for this correction. I appreciate it. Our briefing today will discuss essentially two main issues with one issue in between. I want to talk about the south of Israel, what's happening currently in the war in Gaza, and later we'll discuss the front with Turkey and Lebanon, but in between we'll discuss also Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to Washington, what he went there to discuss, whether it's related also to the security issues that Israel is facing now. So let's please begin with the current situation of the military in the Gaza Strip. Is Israel sort of shifting gears in the way it's managing this war? Is the appointment of the new chief of staff and the confirmation of new plans completely changed the shape of the Gaza war?
Well, it's difficult to say completely. Many of the elements are standard and cannot be changed. There's Hamas, there are hostages, there's a certain territory, and that's the confines of what we are able to do. But yes, the way we handle all these elements has changed, I think, quite considerably. We have to remember that the basic assumption of Hamas, once it embarked on the 7th of October attack, was that whatever Israel is going to make in retaliation, it's not going to take over the Gaza Strip, and this would mean that Hamas would stay in power. And that was the safety net that Hamas used in order to be able to face any Israeli retaliation, be it as painful as it might be. And now, and to a large extent, they were right. The original way of action of Israel was harsh and caused a lot of damage to Hamas. Dismantled many of their formations, caused them to lose a lot of their terrorists and so on. But they knew that Israel is not trying to take over the Gaza Strip. And as long as this was the case, they knew that they would stay in power. Now, under this new leadership of the military and the Ministry of Defense, there is a readiness of Israel to consider this as an option. Not that anybody in Israel is very happy about it, and if there are going to be ways to avoid it, they will be chosen. But we need to release the hostages, and we need to make sure that Hamas is removed from power. And these are two goals that have to be reached, and the way to reach them might necessitate taking over of the entire Gaza Strip by the IDF, and the IDF this time has made the necessary plans to do that. And I think that we are trying to avoid it by putting more and more pressure on Hamas, stopping the humanitarian aid, stopping the electricity, taking more and more chunks of the Gaza Strip under our control, including the Morag axis now, and the operations in the north and in the south and in Rafah, as we all witnessed. But if this is going to be enough in order to convince Hamas to accept our proposal of releasing 10 hostages and 16 bodies, and the remaining hostages will be discussed in the next stage, that would be enough for Hamas to ease the pressure that it faces today. But if it's not going to be accepted, then so far they have refused. The pressure is going to be building up to the extent that to the point where we shall be almost controlling the Gaza Strip, at least controlling the aid when it will be resumed. And this is something that Hamas fears very much. And I hope it's going to be done convincingly enough in order to make Hamas understand that this might happen, and it's better for them to take something better for them instead of being ousted from the Gaza Strip and forced to evacuate.
Okay, thank you for this. First of all, I mean, this idea also has been expressed by Defense Minister Israel Katz, who said the Palestinians are going to lose land if they continue, basically to lose parts of the strip. I have to say, I have to ask a slightly political question. I heard today Ofer Winter speaking on the radio in the morning, and he said he drafted plans back in January 2014, some months before the previous Protective Edge, I think that was the name of the previous operation in Gaza. And then he said already then he proposed completely taking over the strip, including and you know, focusing on the distribution of water and food supplies, replacing essentially Hamas in that capacity, so that you know, any change in the regime can be made possible. Now, he mostly accused the previous leadership of the IDF for being allergic to that word, you know, conquering or occupying the strip. And we see now with the entrance of Eyal Zamir, the new chief of staff, change of plans, etc., that this is all coming together. Can you maybe actually say to what extent Herzi Halevi, the previous chief of staff, sort of put his foot in the door when there was talk of completely taking over the strip? Because on the face of it, this could have been done, you know, 15 months ago, right?
Well, first of all, I think you didn't hear Ofer Winter, but you heard Erez Wiener, because I also heard him speak about it.
Sorry, similar names, and I was driving. My mistake. My correction.
But yes, I think that Herzi Halevi and the entire, it's not something he has done all by himself. I think the entire security establishment was against this idea of taking over Gaza Strip. For many years, they refused to think about it. The idea was there, as you said, since January 14, but nobody was ready to implement it. Not only the security leadership, but also the government was not very interested in doing that. So it stayed in the drawer for a long time. And the question was whether to do it after October 7th. And the government gave an order to defeat Hamas militarily and from the governmental point of view. And the defense establishment translated it into another word in Hebrew, which means to dismantle Hamas, not to defeat it, but to dismantle it. And they kept using this word in Hebrew, it's lefarek. They kept using lefarek instead of lemotet, which reflected a different point of view that they had about what needs to be done in Gaza. And the reason they were not very happy about the idea of defeating was that they were afraid that once you defeat Hamas, you are going to remain with Gaza in your hands. What are you going to do with Gaza once this happens? So they preferred to dismantle Hamas than to defeat Hamas. And I think that Eyal Zamir and Minister Katz, as I said before, are not very happy about taking over Gaza. But they understand that this is an option that has to be looked upon seriously. Because it might be that without it, Hamas is not going to give us what we need and all other components of the war, namely releasing the hostages and removing Hamas from power and making sure that Gaza is not going to be a launching pad for new terror attacks in the future. And I believe this is the case. By the way, I wrote a piece on the first day of the war saying this is what's going to happen in the end, because you're not going to convince Hamas to release the hostages without forcing them to be ousted from power. And and even though it's not a very promising future for us, that's what we need to do. What the leadership of the defense establishment did during the 14 months of first 14 months of the war was describing this taking over of Gaza as something terrible and totally unacceptable, extremely costly, 50 billion shekels a year, many hundreds of soldiers killed every year. And they used that description in order to deter the political leadership from ordering them to do that. And of course, they also had the support of the United States administration. And of course, everybody else was supporting them, the Europeans and many international forces. So this was done effectively, and the government gave up on that for the first period of the war. Now, with the new leadership, I don't know what they present as the cost of something like that. I wouldn't underestimate the cost, but I think they exaggerated it. And what we need to do is to cause a lot of damage to Hamas, so that once we get to the point where we control Hamas, when we control Gaza, if there's no other alternative, the capability of the Palestinians to cause us damage and to charge us with a heavy price is going to be more limited. And anyhow, I think that the numbers about the expenditures that go along with something like that are much exaggerated. It's not $50 billion, 50 billion shekels, because the Palestinian Authority governed Gaza, and Hamas governed Gaza for much less. They spend something like, let's say, 5 to 7 billion shekels a year. So the number given by the defense establishment is 10 times bigger. I think it's a little bit exaggerated.
Thank you. What you say, though, it's a bit frustrating. We'll move to the second subject now, Netanyahu's flight, but it's kind of hard to pinpoint where it came from, you know, the hesitation. I mean, where it got stuck. The army said, we're a contractor, we're going to do whatever the government tells us, we're like a operations contractor, and the government was stopping short of completely taking over the strip, or, you know, the government said, you know, we should conquer the strip, and then the general said, you know what, it's a bit difficult. Like, it's hard to kind of pinpoint which part influenced the other, because it's clear that the generals also have some kind of, let's say, diplomatic thinking. I mean, thinking, not diplomatic, but they think about the longer term and not just the kinetic moving soldiers from point A to point B.
I think they think about the day after, and it's not that the army said that we are contractors, tell us what to do. No, the army, the military, they have brains and minds, and they have the ability to think about the consequences of all kinds of operations. And they thought that this was not a good idea. This is why they came up. What the problem was that they mobilized all kinds of prices that they attached to this idea that were exaggerated, and this shouldn't have happened. But they really thought that this was a bad idea. That's why they raised this issue. They thought that the military is going to pay a heavy price for that throughout the years, and they would have to be in charge of the civil administration that would be informed in the Gaza Strip. And this was another mission that they thought it's beyond their capability, which really raises the need to think out of the box and to find ideas, ways of implementing this civil administration that would not require heavy presence and heavy deployment of forces in the Gaza Strip, and that would be less costly, both from the point of view of the number of casualties that might be expected, and both from the point of money spent on maintaining something like that. And we can do that. I think every day that we kill more Hamas operatives and destroy more Hamas facilities and capabilities, we make them weaker and less dangerous in the future. That's also true.
Can you tell me, maybe in your assessment, you know, if this comes to be, how long basically Israel is gonna, you know, be back, undo the disengagement, so to speak? Like, are we talking months, years, decades?
Well, I'm not a fortune teller, but I guess at least a year is necessary in order to convince the Gazans that Hamas is out and Hamas is not coming back. These are two things that you have to convince Hamas, to convince the Palestinians living in Gaza before you can leave. It's out and not coming back. And once they are convinced, they might be ready to take responsibility for their own lives, and in a way that puts their well-being at the foremost of their goals, and not the destruction of Israel and killing Jews. As long as Hamas is there, this is the order of priorities, and we cannot allow that to happen.
I understand. Okay, thank you for this part about Hamas. Now, I want to briefly discuss the Prime Minister's trip to Washington to meet with US President Donald Trump. I've read that he and Viktor Orban from Hungary are the two leaders who came to see him first after Trump started what's called a tariff war, basically, so, you know, a duel of customs and tariffs between large exporter countries. Israel is caught in all of this, and today the the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, started trade with sharp drops. Is Netanyahu traveling to Washington to discuss this, the economy, or does he have also things like Iran and maybe Lebanon and Syria on his mind? Because we also read over the weekend that American aircraft carriers, I think, were mobilized in the Gulf, indicating potentially some action against Iran.
Well, I think he has a full agenda. This is going to maybe the reason for going to the States was the tariffs, but once he's there, I'm sure he's going to discuss the other issues as well. And it's very important. The tariff issue is very important because if Israel can manage to be exempt from these tariffs, then it's great for the Israeli economy. And we are an economy in a state of war. And we cannot afford now fighting tariff wars with the United States. It's crazy. So we were surprised by these tariffs, and the fact that the Prime Minister takes an initiative to dilute, to get rid of that is very important. That said, of course, Iran is very high on the agenda as well. The buildup of the American force to deal with the Iranian nuclear project is well seen, well visible. And so I think the Prime Minister wants to find out what exactly is in Trump's mind regarding this issue. We definitely don't want all of that to be translated into a not good enough deal with the Iranians regarding the nuclear facilities. I think we are on the same page with the Americans and in our commitment to make sure that Iran should not be allowed to have the capability to produce nuclear weapons, and for that reason, you have to dismantle its nuclear project. And I think that we all agree that if negotiations do not succeed, then a military move is necessary and feasible. And we want to make sure that we get privy to the information about what's going to happen in Iran, so that we should be able to prepare ourselves and, if necessary, also participate. We are not telling the Americans to go do it all by themselves, unless they really insist on. And so all of this, and of course, we should need to be prepared if something like that happens, to face the retaliation of the Iranians. We all expect that to happen as well. It's going to be a long war. And all of these issues should be discussed. And also the situation in Gaza. President Trump repeatedly says that he is committed to releasing the hostages, and all gates of hell are going to be opened on Hamas if they don't release the hostages. So we have started opening the gates of hell by depriving them from humanitarian aid and electricity, and by moving into Gaza and, as you said, taking more and more territories and killing more and more Hamas operatives. All of that is part of the starting of the opening of the gates of hell. But we have to touch base with President Trump on what happens next, how you translate these moves of Israel into pressure that is successful in convincing Hamas to release the hostages, or else move towards taking over the Gaza Strip, and then move to implementing the original Gaza plan of President Trump, of telling the Gazans, listen, you can leave if you like, and it's going to be much better for you than living among the rubble. This is also something that we should discuss with Trump. I will remind you that he announced this plan when he was next to Prime Minister Netanyahu. So definitely time to reassess.
Okay, I must ask, I mean, today you discussed, in the beginning, we discussed also Hezbollah in the north, and today there were rockets from the north, and Hezbollah was hit much, I think, I don't know if much harder than Hamas, but it was hit in a very different way. I mean, isn't there like a sort of expectation of these terror organizations to sort of, change their DNA after like a certain escalation of attacks, which is, an ideology remains, even if it's weakened, the trajectory of the ideology remains the same. So, I mean, is there any, like, for example, in Lebanon today with the violation, what should Israel expect on that front? Because it's not obviously going to occupy parts of southern Lebanon and distribute the aid there, you know, so.
Well, we are definitely living a new era in Lebanon. Hezbollah is much weaker than it used to be in the past. It poses a much smaller threat to Israel because the idea of a ground operation is actually not feasible, as it seems now. And the leadership is eliminated. Is the former leadership that was very important and effective is eliminated. It's a much weaker Hezbollah, and there's a reason for that, to believe that the Lebanese government and the Lebanese armed forces have a much better chance now to deal with Hezbollah and to contain it. And yes, Hezbollah is trying to regroup, but we, under the new agreement that we reached with Lebanon, are able to take action in order to prevent it from deploying in the south and from rearming itself. And we do it. All of that was not possible according to the rules of the game that prevailed before the October 7th, before the agreement was reached, and definitely before October 7th. So we are in a new era in Lebanon. We have to be cautious not to believe that it has changed that much, but we have to realize that new capabilities and opportunities are open to us. I don't expect a normalization with Lebanon tomorrow morning. Yes, you're right that Hezbollah's ideology has not changed a bit, but and it's still a player, an important player inside Lebanon, but much less important than it used to be. And if the Lebanese who don't want to repeat what happened in during 23-24, then it's a good idea for them to stick by the agreement and make their effort in order to control Hezbollah. And we hope that they are going to do that. We don't count on them fully by now because they're not ready yet. But we want them to get stronger and stronger so that they will be able to deal with Hezbollah by themselves and not need our intervention.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for this. Now, from Lebanon, let's move to this larger playground that's opened up to the east, Syria. You know, everyone wants a piece of it. Israel took the northern Hermon early on, and now we have arch foe Iran, and Turkey has also entered the fray and shown some appetite. You know, President Erdogan has been critical of Israel and making some harsh remarks for a long time now. But Turkey is a NATO member, and recently things have come to the point where it's nearly like a you know, face-to-face between Israeli soldiers and Turkish soldiers. Overnight, really fresh, Israel attacked and, according to reports, destroyed the T4 airbase, which was eyed by Turkish troops, and they were heading there. Can you perhaps say what Israel is doing against Iran and Turkey in Syria, and also maybe take it in the wider perspective of whether Israel is planning some joint action with the United States in Iran?
Well, as far as Syria is concerned, we employ in Syria the new security doctrine that we have adopted recently that says that we are not going to allow terror armies to deploy next to our borders and form a threat to our communities. And that's now that Syria has fallen in the hands of a former terror group, we want to make sure that they don't deploy near the border, and that's why we took over the demilitarized zone and a little bit more maybe, and at least have influence beyond it. And we make sure that no threat is deployed, no threatening for organization is deployed over there. That's what we do there, and we do that in cooperation, I think, to some extent with the Druze that control the area beyond the area we control. And we have good relationship with the Druze, and that's good. And that's an interim stage until we find out what's going on in Syria. And it might take a long time before we find out, because Syria is very unstable. A lot of forces are operating. The new government seems to be very much dominated by ultra-radical Islamist organizations. And we have to be very careful about declaring them as a positive element over ruling Syria. It's too early to do that, and I'm afraid it's going to take a long time before we are convinced that this is the case, if we are convinced at all. It's true that some people in the West are more ready to compromise on this issue, but we are more reluctant to do that without having substantial evidence that this is the case. We can rely on Shah. That said, we make sure that no threats are going to emanate from southern Syria towards us, and we clarify the common interests that we have with Shah. We don't want Iran to return to Syria. We don't want Iran to use Syrian territory for delivering arms to to Hezbollah. We don't want Hezbollah to redeploy in Syrian territory. And these are common interests that we have with Shah/Julani. And I think we don't have to cooperate with him. He's going to do that because it's in his own interest. The only question open is the role of the Turks in Syria. I heard the Turkish foreign minister saying again and again that Syria belongs to the Syrians and so on, and that's their decision and so on. As long as this is the case, fine. But it doesn't seem that this really reflects the situation on the ground. There are Turkish forces and Turkish elements in many places in Syria. And as I said, they were eyeing the T4 air base. And we took action against the T4 not because of the Turks, but because there still were some leftovers of armament deployed in this place. And we are trying to make sure that no arms of this former Syrian army led by Bashar al-Assad are going to fall in the hands of Shara, Julani, or any other terror group. And that's what we focus on. So we're not looking for any confrontation with the Turks. Maybe there was, I don't know, but it might be the case that there was something. If the Turks are going to deploy there, it's going to be more difficult and more problematic to take action against the weapons that were left over there. So maybe it was the reason to hurry up. But we definitely don't look for a confrontation with the Turks, and we suggest to Turkey to focus on taking care of its real concerns, and if they have concerns in northern Syria, it can be respected by Israel. But moving into southern Syria, it's something that has no justification, and we hope this is not going to happen.
Okay. Again, on the very, it's a rare scenario, but like, if any real confrontation comes to be between Turkish forces and Syrian forces, first of all, Syria is a NATO member, but I'm not sure it's going to get like the support of NATO.
Turkey is a NATO member.
Turkey is a NATO member, and it's not going to get, countries like England and France coming to fight against Israel for it when it's doing something on basically on foreign soil, right? Not on Turkish soil, even though I'm sure they have claims for why they're being there, etc., and all that stuff. But how realistic is? I mean, with Russia at the time, we had a sort of deconfliction mechanism. Is Israel working to set up some kind of deconfliction mechanism with Turkey and Syria, or are we just going to let it play out? And if some crisis comes to be, then we'll solve it when it comes. Because if there's any news, IDF kills Turkish soldiers, that's going to be not good.
And we should make an effort not to kill Turkish soldiers, I guess. We don't need the confliction because we know what's going on in Syria more or less. And they don't have an air force over there, so it's not the same situation like we had with the Russians. I don't think that Turkey has all kinds of aspirations that are have to do with the past of Turkey as an empire, and have to do with the fact that it's led by an Islamic radical leader. But at the same time, Turkey, as you said, is a member of NATO. Turkey realizes how strong Israel is. I don't think they're looking for confrontation. They speak very let's say dangerously, but I hope that they understand that there is a difference between what you say and what you do.
Is it the rhetoric of being leader of the Ummah, of the Arabic Ummah, that they're talking like this, or is there any internal reason? Because recently the rhetoric has been harsh for months, but it escalated over the past few days.
Well, it might be that it escalated because of the riots and the demonstrations in Turkey, but it is not that far from what Erdogan was saying beforehand, so I cannot say that this is the reason. Maybe the timing has something to do with the situation inside the Turkey, including the demonstrations and the harsh economic situation. So it might have been one of the reasons for which Erdogan said what he said, but let's put it that's what he thinks. He's very much pro-Palestinian. He's very much anti-Israeli. He's deeply under the impression that Israel is doing all kinds of terrible stuff in Gaza. He's definitely committed to the Palestinian issue, as he interprets it, and he really believes in it. And he really thinks that Turkey should be an empire again. That's he has spoken this way for many, many times, so it's not something new.
Okay. My last question is: there seems to be on Iran. It seems to be kind of a confluence of elements. The Trump administration's recent letters with escalating threats that if you don't come to the negotiating table, something might happen. The deployment of the aircraft carrier, etc. The stopping of limitations on the delivery of heavy bunker-busting bombs that was in effect during the Biden administration. Do you think there is a sort of moment coming, an opportunity that Israel might need to take, because if it passes, it's not going to come back, regarding Syria's nuclear arsenal? Iran's nuclear arsenal, sorry. I keep going.
Well, the opportunity is here. We know how dangerous the Iranians are. They were
opportunity, I mean, in the sense of the psychology of the people in action and not actually the military tech. I mean, who's sitting in the White House and what he thinks.
Yeah, I think also from this point of view, there's an opportunity now. I think the people in the White House understand, this administration understands very well that Iran should be taken care of and making sure that they don't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons. This the administration understands. And if they could do it without, they understand how dangerous Iran is, and they also understand that there is a military option that is credible and that it's doable. You can destroy the Iranian nuclear project. So there is an opportunity here. That said, they would, of course, prefer to use this military threat in order to convince the Iranians to give up on the military project without moving into kinetic activity. That's exactly what they're trying to do right now with the letter and with the gathering of all these forces around Iran, to make sure that the Iranians understand that the United States means business. This is why one of the reasons why they took action in Yemen against the Houthis, because this is another way of conveying the same message and delivering the weapons to Israel. And everything else they do is to convince Iran, on the one hand, to give in before there is a need to use military power. And at the same time, it's here in order to be used if the Iranians are not convinced and do not show readiness to adopt a deal that can be considered by Israel and the United States as satisfactory. Then the military option becomes relevant and not only a threat, but also a plan to be implemented.
And one can assume that in such a case, pilots from the Israeli Air Force, especially with the F-35s, will join in, right? Or is the U.S. going to go it alone?
I'm not sure. It's, as I said, this is one of the issues that is going to be discussed in Washington by President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's the Americans can say, we don't need you. We have enough. And if you don't participate, the Iranians will have less incentive to hit you. So maybe you should stay at home, and if we need you, we'll let you know. But from an Israeli point of view, we are ready to participate. Of course, we are ready to participate. If the Americans reach this decision that they have to use military force against Iran, I'm sure that Israel will say to the Americans, we are at your disposal. Whatever you need, we are ready to do.
Let's see. Okay, I thank you very much for this briefing, Mr. Kuperwasser. I think we covered most of the ground we discussed. We discussed Gaza, Netanyahu in the US, Iran, and Syria, and I confused it a bit. I've just moved houses, so I've had many hours without sleep. But thank you so much for this briefing. And just to remind everyone, this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later today and will be made available. I would like to thank my colleague Iman Safadi for executive producing this briefing. Again, thank you to the journalists and to you, Mr. Kuperwasser.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Iman.
Thank you. Thank you, Yossi.
Bye.
Bye-bye.